Today I'm going to show you how to sew on buttons using your sewing machine. It's actually quite simple to do. Once you've practiced a little bit, it'll become second nature to you. The machine I'm using is a mechanical Viking 6440 because it's a machine that I've had for about 50 years. And now I just basically use it for sewing on buttons, doing buttonholes, and other detail work. Otherwise, I use my semi-industrial machines that I have down here in the studio. It still works great. And so how you want to set up your machine when you want to sew on buttons is you can snap off the presser foot. There are button feet that are available. I don't use them. That isn't how I learned originally, but there is nothing wrong with using those. And I set it aside. I come over to my settings and I'm going to drop my feed dogs. Okay, so nothing's going to be feeding my fabric back and forth right here. I'm going to have the stitch width set on zigzag. I'm going to have my stitch length set on 0 because I don't want it traveling. And the stitch width itself is going to be adjusted depending on the space between the holes that I'm going to be sewing on. And so that's a little tweak that you're going to experiment with before you actually sew them on all the way. Okay, so this is a garment that the buttons are actually going to be decorative. There is not going to be a placket that they're going to be buttoned into. So I'm using 2-hole buttons, and I'm going to line it up over my pins. I will pull my pins out in just a few minutes. You can do it with marks or whatever works for you. This tends to work for me pretty easily because I've done it forever. I want to come up, I line up the buttonholes just in front of the ankle that holds the feet onto my machine. And then at that point, I'm going to gently remove the pins that are marking where it's supposed to be. And if I need to lift it, I've got my fingers securing it all right here anyway. I'm going to bring this back down, and I'm going to hand turn the flywheel because I want to make sure that it's not going to hit the button when it does the actual zigzag stitch. So you just, okay, it needs to be just a tad wider. Okay, I might hit the, so you just need to line up the button and make sure you go through both sides to make sure that it's lined up. And then once you know that the holes are lined up to the needle and the width of the zigzag, then I normally count back and forth 6 to 8 times depending on where it's going to be. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and then with my needle up, I am going to turn my stitch width down to 0. So now my stitch length and my stitch width are both at 0. I'm going to move my needle into the left position, and I'm going to actually be knotting it off. So I'm going to stitch up and down in one spot 3 to 4 times, and that's it. It's done. And it's not going to come undone because I just knotted it off by doing the left needle in one spot. Now I want to get set up for the next one, so I turn it back to my zigzag. I leave my stitch length at 0, and because I already know that it's almost at 4 for my stitch width for this button, I'm ready to do my next one. Now, this particular piece, a lot of you will probably recognize, and you call it a hump jumper. It actually was introduced at least 50 years ago. And it was part of what came with my machine. And when we were being trained by Viking on how to use these, this was actually used as a lift to put space between the button and the fabric. And this is also called making a shank, okay? So this would be making an actual machine sewn button shank. By lifting that up while it's zigzagging back and forth, it's elongating the stitch, And so once this is pulled back out, there will actually be height between the button and the fabric that will allow for whatever other piece of fabric or garment is going to be buttoned. And that way the buttonhole will not be smashed in, pulling funny, or just having that loving hands look. So by having that lifted up to allow that shank to be made at the same time will really put a nice finishing on your garments. And there's two different heights to this, and the thicker one is for your thicker type of fabrics. Think like your woolens, your corduroys, fabrics along those lines. The thin side would be done for like your shirting fabrics and fabrics along those lines. And it takes just a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to the hang of it, it's like I can blow through buttons in a minute and put them all on up to about 15, and then I just go back through when it's all done. And also make sure you're always lowering the presser foot too. When you're all done, then I come back, I cut the top threads first, then I go and I do the under ones. And that's it. So you can just keep plowing right through. Just get your little habit in place of your machine settings that work for you. And so for me, again, I drop the feed dogs. I set my stitch width or stitch selector on zigzag. Okay, and so just the plain zigzag. And then I use my stitch length on 0. My stitch width of that zigzag will be dependent on the space between the holes on the button. Then when I've stitched it all on, I'll set both to 0, and then I will actually turn the dials so that I have my needle in the left position that will go through the left hole and go up and down 3 to 4 times to lock it off. Thank you.